Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 67. Well, the power issues in the last episode forced out hands. Instead of dealing with the fine-tuning of the chemical factories, or anything like that, we will be forced to deal with our third power plant. And yes, it will be nuclear. I am kind of glad that we reached the point where the two old plants aren't enough, so I have an excuse to build this. Since this is a pretty big project, and the location will be a bit remote, thanks to the placement of the uranium deposits, we will only manage to deal with the planning, with a little bit of construction. And I'm sure I will have some things I forgot, which I hope to spot while editing this episode. In fact, as I'm writing this, I just realized that I forgot to add the chemical storage, so that one will need to be dealt with in the next episode. Thankfully, the chemical district will be relatively close, so we might not need to do it with trains. Time will tell. First, to make sure we have enough power for the time being, I will go ahead and disable exports towards the NATO powers, and instead start importing it from the Soviets. We have all the rubles in the world, so we can easily afford it. Now, let's start looking for a suitable place to build that power plant. This one looked promising, but then I decided to first look if we have a spot with a uranium deposit nearby. We could just use trains to move the raw ore around, but if we can avoid doing that, maybe we should. And indeed, we have a spot just south of the chemical district. The uranium deposits are unfortunately right on top of the exposed bedrock, so it will take a long time to hammer that terrain into shape. Anyways, thanks to the mirroring function, finding a connection point for the processing plant is easy. It does still require us to construct some stuff in less than ideal places, like this conversion plant. We need to make sure to give the conveyor belts a clear way to the mine, so the road will need to face towards the river. And just as I feared, we are too far away from all our current construction offices, so we need to build a temporary one, just to deal with the terrain. In the meantime, we have a big open space here, so we can at least place the power plant itself. We had three choices: the single or the twin reactor version, or the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant from the Ukraine DLC. The DLC plant is slightly more powerful than the vanilla single reactor station, but at the same time, it had fewer high voltage connections on it. Ultimately, I decided to go with the Zaporizhzhia power plant. Sure, it has fewer connections, but it's not like I will ever use all of them. And the big bridge across the river is done. And thankfully, the track layers are continuing to work on the other side. At this point, This crossing is unnecessary. Since the chemical branch is finished, we might as well give the original rail CO a rest, and let the new guys handle it from here. We still need a bit of steel and boards for the roof of this temporary CO. And just then, the workers went home. We are so close. Oh right. We need to separate these tracks into two, so both track layers can work on them. Unfortunately, that's not how to do it. I will discover my mistake in a couple minutes, and place the signals at the correct side of the construction crossing. Alright, time to get this out of the way. Those mountainsides won't create shelves all by themselves. As usual, simply using the terrain tools are too slow, since they are trying to avoid creating slopes above a certain grade. Using buildings with small footprints, however, will allow us to create cliffs with steep drops. We just need to use the yellow ghost images to do it. After we create a small shelf, we can try to move on to slightly bigger buildings. And if it's still too small, we just need to keep it at a little more. There we go. We have enough flat room to use the small cable car station. Incidentally, these are the buildings I like to use. First, I use the small cable towers to chisel out a small flat area. Then if it's still too small, I move on to the big tower. That is usually enough to make room for the station itself. At that point, it is big enough to use it for the rest of the leveling job. Now we just need to make a big enough shelf for the uranium mine. After that, we can move on to carving out the place for the actual cable car station, since we need to bring people up here to extract the ore. And as usual, just be glad you are watching this in fast forward. Holding the mouse button, while watching minimal progress being made is a maddening experience. Unfortunately, we cannot use the mine itself to keep leveling just yet. Once we do get a yellow ghost image for it, then we can stop using the cable car station. Let's give it another try. There we go. We can use the mine from now on to create the final mountainside shelf for itself. Once the last of the yellow footprint dots disappear, we can place it. Just make sure you place the mine in a way that allows you to place the conveyor connections as well. I really wish more than one excavator could work on this. Still a million times faster than using the terrain tools, but it could be faster. There, we have a green ghost image. Let me double check the yield. 67%. Not bad. Could be better, but for this, it's plenty enough. And as expected, making a direct connection is impossible, so we need to use towers. We managed to do it with just one. Good times. The actual fuel rod fabrication plant need to be connected to the conversion plant. Well, this does allow us to place the necessary factory connections, but we might need to move it a bit in the next episode, to make room for the chemical warehouse. So, let's move on to roads. For now, I'll just place dirt connections, and when we are ready to start building, I'll move on to gravel. We might as well place the bus stop. At this point, I still wasn't sure if I'll use buses or trains, but once I take another look at the distances, I will choose trains. I'll just let them build that bus stop. We do need to move on to how we deal with the workers for the mine. Using the tried and tested cable cars will do just fine. We just need to make sure to carve the second shelf that is more or less on the same elevation as the mine. It seems we are doing it slightly higher than we needed, but it's a small enough difference, so I think we'll be okay. Good, everything's lined up. The road connections are facing each other, and the cable is pointing downhill. Instead of bothering to create a path for the road, I'll just build a small bridge. Here I tried to lower the overall elevation of the cable car station, but it will be for naught. But after messing with the terrain, the bridge will be placeable, so I got that going for me, which is nice. There. That's all we need. That notification about the power issues was still coming from the last transformer fire. As far as I can tell, things are okay ever since we started importing power. So, we have the arrival station for the miners, let's deal with the departure station. As usual, finding the position for these towers that is both buildable, and will allow cable connections to be placed, is a bit of a pain, but once we reach the flat plains below, we are golden. Also, having to work on bedrock isn't helping matters. Any second now. There, one tower down. We just need to weave our way through these power poles, and hook it all up to the other cable station. And that's that. The most annoying part of this project is done. Let's place the cooling tower next. We just need to make sure to place it in a way that allows us to connect the coolant pipes in a nice orderly fashion. Yeah, this will do. That's the cooling dealt with. Out comes the extremely hot steam, and we pump the cold water back in to use it again to spin the turbines. I turn my attention somewhere else, and the airport is almost finished. Very nice. And that pedestrian bridge is complete. I call it a pedestrian bridge, since it will never see car traffic. This is where I decided to just go for a train station to bring in workers. Even Mikhailovia is closer to this place than our new capital. In fact, I might use one train from there too, just to lower unemployment a little. I was a bit worried about walkability, but I was fairly certain that with the roads upgraded, it will be just fine. Deciding where to hook this up to the rail network was a head-scratcher though. The Gemstonia branch is a terminal, we cannot go through the fields, so the next logical choice was going through the Penkivsk Valley, and see where we end up from there. At first I was flirting with the idea of splitting it off the chemical branch, but I'll do something else later. First, let's make sure we can actually thread through that Penkivsk Valley. With the water and sewage substations done, we don't need these footpaths anymore. That was some ugly clipping, we can do better than that. Let's make sure that heating is working fine in the capital, and then get back to work. I will go this far, and deal with the actual junction a bit later. We do need to find our way to the actual power plant though. Simply following the elevation lines, making sure not to go up or down too abruptly will result in a nice smooth ride. Yeah, I am quite happy with that. This abrupt dip is a bit unseemly, so let's fix it. There we go. Placing the signals after the bridge does allow the track layers to work together. For road connections, we had a couple options. I decided to use both. We can get a path coming in from the Penkovsk mines, as well as the edge of the Gemstonia farm fields. Now, since the actual fuel rod fabrication unit and the power plant aren't connected directly, we will need to add some local deliveries. The first step for that is a container storage for the fresh fuel rods. My first attempt will be this little hole that looked promising, but it will not work out in the end. The winner will be on the opposite side. We will simply use trucks to pick up the finished fuel from that storage, and bring it straight into the power plant. As for the spent fuel containers, well, I decided to be a bit crazy. Yep. I will use helicopters to pick them up, and fly them to whoever is willing to take them off my hands. Flying through the skies with dangerous radioactive materials. What could possibly go wrong? At this point I was pretty much ready to unleash my construction offices on this place. But since it's winter, there is no point doing that with road vehicles, since we only have dirt roads at our disposal right now. But, we could start upgrading said roads to gravel at the very least. Helicopters can carry some of the foundation materials to the actual buildings in the meantime. I still wasn't sure how to deal with the rail connection just yet. My original idea of splitting off the chemical branch seemed less feasible than it was a couple minutes ago. What we could do, however, is set up the obligatory railroad power connection. We had one at each of our previous power stations, and I bet they are pretty close to being overloaded at this point. Now that I'm more experienced with placing the cables for such a building, I can plan ahead. And by such a building, I mean one that has multiple power connections. I simply see which way the connections need to go, and then create a neat row of connections facing that way. Then I do the same at the power plant. I know the rail power supply is to the left, so I just pick the most obvious connections, and bring them out into a similar row of connections. And with that, we have 4 lines facing each other. Way easier to decide which line goes where, without accidentally crisscrossing them. We can also hook up one of the high voltage connections to the export line. We have a path going into the wider power network through the Mutigrad double transformer setup, so this will also put extra power into the network. Looking at the population statistics, things are okay right now. Apart from the usual winter blues, people are relatively happy. This is where I finally decided where I want to connect the new power plant to the rail network. Instead of going through the chemical branch, I will simply hook up here. Sure, the trip is a bit longer for passengers, but I think they will manage just fine. Trains aren't affected by the snow like buses are. I might add a second construction crossing on the other side, so the old rail CO can reach those other 2 lanes merging in from the right. With this new setup, we can trim back these rails a bit, and then turn them towards the new junction. There is a bit of clipping, but nothing egregious. We might as well connect the 4 rail power supply lines together. With the different connections lined up beforehand, it's more about placing well-placed connections, avoiding poles being too close to each other, and not creating too ugly sections as we try to avoid the road and the rails. I'm still not sure if I'll use trains or trucks to deliver the chemicals. Those 2 plants are right next door, and we could just go between the river and the mountain. That will make our lives much easier. There are still moments when people end up queuing outside the shops. It's about time we got around to building that big shopping center. Since the museum is so empty, I'll demolish that, and replace it with the store. Once it's done, I will demolish the small store behind it, and rebuild the museum in its place. We already have a bit of chemicals ready to go in the new district. It's minuscule, since we only have 1 train ferrying the workers right now, but I will definitely add more to that commuter line in the next episode. And I finally remembered to check up on Utegrad. That's our lumber yard for the construction industry. Since we use so few boards for that purpose, the forest in that area is still relatively dense. At this point, I was ready to call it an episode, but I really wanted to wait for spring before I signed off. Despite the snowy roads, these gravel paths are progressing nicely. Not surprising, they are the second easiest to build after dirt roads after all. Here I decided to check up on the production volumes for our consumer goods. We could only really do it for the clothes and for electronics though. Those are the ones we are actively selling, so there is a big difference between consumption and production. But we are not selling the food or the meat we make, so the 2 numbers are always going to be very close to each other, right up until the consumption outpaces the production capacity. Anyways, if the clothing and electronics industries are kept well supplied, we have enough production for a lot more people. I will need to look into the food and meat though, but I think we should still be okay on those 2. And the snow is finally melting. That should speed up the road construction going towards the new power plant. The good things about this nuclear setup is that we are going to make a lot more fuel than we can use. So, if we are ever in need of more power, we can just build a second plant and deliver fuel to it. Also, you might have noticed that I didn't set up an export for the fuel rods we make. There is only one reason for that. Just look at our bank balance. We have all the money we could ever need, and we won't be needing dollars. Maybe I'll buy the Western concrete mixer blueprints, but that's about it. What's the point of hoarding money if we are not using it? We are not some Western capitalist pig dogs, no sir. Let's not forget about the fire safety for this place. I'd rather not turn Mutigrad into a second Pripyat. There we go. We have the river for water right next door, so the response time should be lightning quick. At this point, I can only think of the chemicals that I still need to sort out. I still need to add a footpath between the power plant and the train station, but that's barely worth mentioning. So, in the next episode, we will turn all our attention to building this power plant, and once it's up and running, we will continue building the water infrastructure. I will also try to remember to add localized water supplies to places I've missed. That includes the 2 new chemical factories, the alumina plant in Penkovsk, the concrete facility in Adumsky, and let's not forget about our new pride and joy, the nuclear power plant. I might even try to breathe some life into Penkovsk if we have enough manpower to do so. It is also dependent upon how much chemical production we can squeeze out of our new factories. After all, the reason we built those chemical plants in the first place was to use them for the aluminium industry, but now that we have water treatment and the new nuclear industry on the horizon, it might not be enough. I guess time will tell. The uranium fuel rods do take priority over the aluminium, which we could only use to get money at this point. Anyways, I hope you liked the video. If you did, you can support me on Ko-fi, for which you can find a link in the description. If you are not the donating type, that is fine too. You can still support me by leaving a like, or subscribing to the channel, which just might motivate me to make more. Until then, see you later.